what's up, everyone? This is Etse with another episode of The Company Next Door. As you know, we've been traveling for Season 3, and this will be my last episode here in the South Jersey, Philly region, and I'm super stoked to be here. I'm at Gradwell House recording studio with the founders, the owners, Dave and Steve, and just happy to be here. This is a great way to kick it off before we head to Virginia. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Yep, doing all right.
We got kind of a crazy setup, obviously, with the COVID, so I'm in the live room, and got control room A, control room B, so you'll if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to be all confused of what's going on. But we're all here.
Trying to keep it safe.
Ette's that way. I can see him that way.
So anyway, thank you guys for your time. I know you're real busy, but I was really excited about this one because not only has Gradwell House been around, since I think 98, so 20 plus years in business, which is that's a big deal. That's a feat. Most companies don't ever see that. It's been through transformations, and then we've got this great studio now, which we'll talk about. It's an incredible place. But also, you guys have built this atmosphere. You've built, or I don't want to say you've built, but you've been a huge part of the scene here in this area. Any band that's doing cool things comes here. What's that like for you guys? Does that resonate or no? Am I just making it up?
It's a little weird. We're a little close to it for it to be. It feels so organic to us because it's just our friends, people we know, and then it's just clients that we've come to become friends with. Tom, our friend Tom, that is how we know you, I'd say.
Right.
He is sort of one of those people came in to do sessions, and then you end up getting lunch, and then your lunch gets a little longer, and the session gets a little shorter, and then the session sort of stops happening, and you just end up that you're just friends.
Yeah.
And you're just getting lunch.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like a lot of how our relationships with clients have developed over the years, because it's been kind of like a long career for us as younger guys, But yeah, it doesn't feel, I know that we are sort of a hub because we have the rehearsal rooms and we have the, multiple spaces to be able to do recording, so you can have a lot of people here at once, which is something we always wanted. Previous spaces hasn't been possible. We rented spaces that only had one control room. It was a pretty lonely job. But I don't know, Dave, what do you think? Can you feel the magnetism of a hub?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely now more than ever, because I do
That's
think,
true.
It's with having a bunch of producers and engineers and people rent the spaces downstairs, they're attracting, there's obviously some overlap,
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
but they're also bringing new people in that we haven't had in here before. So it definitely feels like with this space, what we wanted to do with it has really the vision has kind of formed. I
was going to say, is this kind of what you guys had 22 years ago? I mean, I don't know if that's how it formulated, or was it just like, hey, we're going to start a studio? I mean, you guys were in Maple Shade in a basement, right?
Right. I was in a basement, and Dave was sort of running his own parallel basement at the same time. And mine just happened to be the one that was on Gradwell Ave, so it became known as the Gradwell House because we did shows. So house shows and recording.
Awesome.
And then... and Dave was doing recording as well. And then when I needed to get out of the space, they were actually selling the house that it was in. I was renting. And my wife found this really sketchy warehouse in Gloucester City for like $700 a month. And it had a junkyard dog and everything. It was like all fenced in. It had a button that you had to click to get the gate to open.
Sounds
to
awesome.
get it. It wasn't not awesome. But it was cheap.
Yeah.
And then after being there for about a year, I was doing a lot of touring. And I knew that Dave was kind of doing this parallel path. And I think I knew that he was not doing it did I know you were you done at that point, Dave?
No. I was
You were still in the basement?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was subbed for me at the studio. Dave subbed for me when I had moved into this small warehouse because I actually had to pay rent. It wasn't in my house.
Right.
So I was like, I got to get somebody to work while I'm away. So then I realized he was better at it than I was, and that people liked him more, and he was better with the numbers. And then I was like, I think maybe I should work for this guy. So no, that we decided to rent another space somewhere we could actually have clients, no junkyard dog, none of that stuff. So we ended up in Haddon Heights, which is the town we're in now, but just a few blocks over.
And so it's kind of been just a step-by-step progression. Did you have a
Yeah.
vision? One day we're going to build a spot with, what is it, 6,000 square feet?
Yeah, but 6,400.
Yeah, so just so you guys listening or watching, they bought a Mason chapel or temple. I'm not sure.
Lodge.
A lodge.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's incredible what they've done. I mean, I'm in the live rooms, wood floors. It's huge. You've got control rooms, and like Dave said, I think there's 8 or 9 rehearsal rooms, studios down below.
Yeah.
Did you ever see this, or was this just happened? Was this just something that just happened?
The thing that we knew when we were trying to get out of our old space is that ideally we could get multiple control rooms so that we could work on more than one thing at a time. It's very limiting, like Steve always pointed out. We're always going to have a cap with our old space if we have one room.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because and also, I mean, that worked for a time when it was kind of like, I was slogging every day and kind of going in, but it doesn't work when you're kind of like, you run into a lot of competing engineers working when Matt's working. Steve and I are all doing something. It's a lot of like jockeying for time kind of thing, So that was for sure what was going to happen. And we were actually under contract with another building before this. And with that other building, our tentative idea was going to include a studio, control room, live room, some isolation. And then on the other side, we were looking at the idea of doing one rehearsal room and one control room. That's what we figured we could fit out of it, Whereas when we came in here, that vision kind of went a bit further,
Yeah.
And, so I wouldn't say that it was always the vision, but I think that, it's surprising to me how much I like all the stuff happening. Like Steve saying, the loneliness of the old space really did kind of, that wore a little bit for a while there, particularly if you're doing a lot of solo mixing or whatever. Whereas this space, it really is nice to have a lot of traffic.
Yeah, it adds to that scene, that energy.
Yeah, and I think that
I don't think we knew we didn't have that though. I don't think we knew what we were missing because there wasn't
Sure.
anywhere else
Yep.
that had it. That we were
it-
like, oh man, I wish we could be like that place. So I
Right.
mean, it was a little weird to. It sort of fell into our laps because obviously the community part of it is not weird. We always do shows and
Sure.
events and stuff. So that part isn't weird. But it was weird to think like, oh, it could be like when you work in a creative space and
Yeah.
people come interrupt you, but like they're interrupting you with the coolest stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you need help with not with your dumb IT problem, you need help fixing a mic or whatever, because
Right.
there's control rooms downstairs, so there's people doing engineering in the building. It's not random. It's all the same. We're all doing this music industry stuff. So it's so weird to be in a space with so many people that are doing what you're doing and think about it the same way that you think about it.
It kind of
Unusual. It's unusual.
When you said that, it reminds me of there's some things happening around the country where they're little entrepreneurial hubs, and you'll have just 10, 15 offices, and they're all just building companies, and you're walking next door. It's kind of that type of scene.
Yeah.
For
Which
musicians.
is, and you wouldn't. It didn't. I hadn't experienced it previously, so it
Yeah.
seemed weird that it could exist, and to be the part of it existing is kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool,
So let me go back because so you were doing house shows. You're both doing. Were you doing house shows as well, Dave, or just producing?
We didn't do house shows, but we both had bands that were touring, and like the difference that I think with the two studio spaces is that initially for me it was like I was more getting into it, not necessarily to do it as a career kind of thing, more to do it for my band and for a couple other bands. So I was actually interested more in the model of like, not necessarily the Motown model, but almost the model of like, like bands like Fugazi and stuff that I grew up with, where I was like, which is very similar to Steve in the sense of the DIY aspect.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can just do this myself. Do you know what I mean? Or we can make these records for
Sure.
ourselves. You know what I mean? Particularly because not many people that I'd worked with before had done a good job for me. Do you know what I mean? So I was like,
absolutely.
that kind of thing. But I didn't even think about doing it as a job, so to speak, or career path until I worked with Steve.
So what was so this is you're like high school, like 17, 18, or in 20s, or where are we?
Yeah, late 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the path that both of you guys were on career-wise? Or what was there any path, I guess?
You want to go first, Steve?
I think it's easier if I describe Dave.
Okay, Dave, you describe Dave.
No.
Dave, tell us.
I think it is easier to understand our relationship when you can see some of the wild differences, right? Dave has a lot more options as far as education and his skill set, as far as career ways he could go career-wise. And I think, he was able to kind of like, to me, it seems like he was able to make a choice, like more like, oh, I have more
Options,
choices
yeah.
to make.
You not so much.
Not that I didn't have choices, I wasn't stupid, but I just worked at a record store and I was just recording bands. And I honestly, the only reason I wanted to record is because there was nothing else. And then also, I think that's agreeable to you, right, Dave? You sort of agree with that wholly. Have you ever had any other job besides playing music?
Right.
What is better than recording or doing live sound or like audio related?
Right.
I just don't.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah,
And
I feel like if I
also-
found that thing, I would be doing that thing instead of this
Right,
thing,
And I also agree with that perspective too, of that idea of the least sucking, because it's not, because every job's got its like pitfall
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That you can definitely, and this one in particular does have a degree, particularly when Steve and I were younger, where I don't think you could say audio engineer or live sound engineer without bitter somewhere in it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like
While
no one ever
describing, why
seemed
describing?
happy.
Yeah,
Sorry to curse, but no one ever seemed happy necessarily doing it, which is odd because it is, like Steve said, a really cool.
It's
job.
such a cool job. I never got it, especially live sound, like the live sound engineer, curmudgeon-y guy. somebody's giving you money to, like, at the end of the day, you get to do that and they're
Yeah.
going to give you money. That seemed impossible to me that a job could exist like that.
But are there moments? I mean, you guys have been doing this for 20 years, and are you still excited about it? Like, where are you after 20-something years? What challenges you? What's kind of interesting to you?
For me, it's I transitioned away from being a studio engineer into
Right.
being partially a studio engineer and mostly a live sound engineer.
Gotcha.
It's almost all the same skill set. It's just presented differently. So for me, traveling and doing live sound in really wacky venues, in really varying sizes, night to night, I just think that's super fun and
always a
extremely
challenge.
challenging. And I think it's kind of unfair. You get to a point in life where once you get to a certain skill level of doing something, once you get good enough at something, it starts to become easy, and that is like sort of super unfair to your entire history of getting to that point. You know what I mean? It's just like, damn it, like I did all this work and now it's easy. It just feels weird. There's something to that that's always kind of hits me. But so now it's like comes really easy and comfortably. So that. I think the challenge is those new spaces, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like weird and you're like, okay, well, now there is this thing I have not experienced previously. So now I do have a new problem to solve.
So, and before you answer, Dave, Steve, were you getting burnt out on the engineer side?
When I started working with Dave, I was already in 2002.
Okay, so you were way burnt
I just
out.
because I was doing it so much,
Yeah.
and the thing that's funny is, and this is probably goes for a lot of people, right? So like, if you have a creative job, it's not like you're, when you're building websites, you're not building websites for like these awesome companies that are giving you this great graphic design to work with. You're working with garbage,
Yeah.
so that can grind you out, and that's where I think a lot of the people that did what Dave and I were doing at the same time. They don't do it anymore.
Right.
Or they transition to this totally different field. Dave and I have been recording bands for 20 years. We don't record anything else. I mean, very little else. I mean, 10% of it is other. Everything else is rock and roll bands, dude. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
But I mean, it took work to get to that,
Yeah.
So I mean,
How about you, Dave? What lights you up today after 20-something years?
I haven't. Steve's actually has been doing it longer than me, so I don't have quite the 20-year mark yet.
Okay.
Although, that's pretty. I'm getting pretty close, But I don't know. I think that like stuff, my personality, it takes me a really long time to feel comfortable that I'm good at something.
Gotcha.
Do you know what I mean? And I agree. I very much. It's actually the way that Steve put it, like that. The annoying aspect of when it actually is, you know what I mean? That like you couldn't spread out the ease a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it all of a sudden has to hit you.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I could have
Like,
used a little bit
yeah,
of
I
that
coulda
easy
used-
20
I
years
used-
ago.
Yeah, I could use a little of that
yeah.
energy and that confidence like 10 years. No, but I mean, I think we were talking about this the other day where I think that there's an aspect to it where I still feel like I hear something and I'm not getting there. Like I'm always trying to improve on that end.
Gotcha.
But I also feel like, again, some of the technical stuff, because I don't know if I'm as like naturally technical in some ways. I think I'm more musical maybe. So learning a lot of the technical stuff, it took me a really long time to feel comfortable with a lot of the stuff.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? I don't want there to be any question in my brain like, no, okay, I understand it. So I think luckily because I've been teaching a long time, I'm just constantly reinforcing that, But yeah, man, I'm still with it. I still really enjoy it, and I still like.
It's a little freaky how much you still like it sometimes.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. But I think that that's where I didn't, like I said, when I was doing it before I partnered with you, I didn't think about it the same. I think when I started working with you, I started to work with bands that I just was like, just any like band that was kind of coming in.
Right.
And that changed my perspective. And also working digitally changed my perspective. It was way more fun than analog,
Sure.
which sounds funny, but it was easier to get good results. So it was more, the feedback was more fun,
Right.
analog. But I think digital is easier to get a good result personally.
Yeah, and the clients are happier.
Yeah.
So-
no, but
Faster.
yeah, but
Faster,
yeah.
yeah.
But honestly, I do think that doing this stuff is an incredibly good fit for my personality. The engineering side, I think, like there's just something I just realized. I was like, why would I want to tour, like travel around with a band?
Yeah.
I just
not
wanna
a fit for your personality.
Yeah,
Right,
like
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is, but I get bored, like, and particularly if people aren't really invested in like rehearsing and stuff like that. And Steve, like the experience of like, you're going at it from a different perspective, but sometimes that sit around and wait thing, I just can't hang.
Oh no, I struggled with that when I was playing. Because I really did, and I think that's a big problem for a lot of people in bands. I think that's obviously the pandemic is killing those type of people.
Yeah.
But I'm like built built for that. Sit around and wait is like my thing. You know what I mean? I remember like I did my first tour with a smartphone, and I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm going to get paid today? This is insane.
Yeah.
You know, like I watched Netflix in the van and then somebody gave me money at the end of the day. This is so stupid. And I got to do sound. I got to play with a soundboard. It's so weird. You know, are we lucky because it happened to us or we made it happen for ourselves, whatever, right? But you want to try to help people have that same thing where you're just like, because it's just such a nice feeling to not have that weird doubt in what you do or, you know, whether your day is going to be good or bad because you don't like the thing you're about to go do. So
how important is it to you, Dave, you were talking about, you know, because I know you're actually known as far as, you know, outside the community, outside of yourselves, you're known for your technicality, your skills on the board. So it's funny to hear that you're not, you know, you feel like you could always be better. How important is it to you guys in any industry to master your craft? What advice do you have for that? What are your feelings on that to run a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for this particular business, it's definitely, I mean, I guess if we look at the studio as a business, like separate from ourselves, it needs to be very technically proficient on its own hand. But I mean, I think that this particular trade, you need to be a master of it, I think. Because like doing what Steve's doing, it's like, you're not going to get in his position where you're going to be doing front of house for a band if you're not not way past, but you know what I mean, that idea of being past the technical so you can actually focus on making it sound good. Right. There's an aspect of it where you can't be so sweating that, you know what I mean, that you don't understand how this works, that you can't focus on that, you know? Yeah. So I think that's where, like what Steve's talking about, that kind of comfort, that's incredibly, you know, I think it's essential to doing this for sure, you know?
And that's the thing that you try to, when you're teaching people audio and live sound especially is based on troubleshooting because you have to do so much of it on the fly and you don't get to go to YouTube and research it. You just have to know the answer or you suck at your job, right? So the bag of tricks gets really deep and big, but that's the thing that you can't share, you know, like that. And that's like that thing where you wish you could just, you know, you could just give people your bag of tricks because that's where the money is, you know, like that's
where
the
your value
stuff.
is.
Yeah, because anybody can know how all the stuff works and even be able to hook it all up. But when something goes wrong, knowing the 17 things that it could be and knowing how to go through them in an intelligent way to get it on the third try instead of getting it on the 17th try, right? That's the big skill set. And I think that, to me, that's the thing that Dave and I do. We have an ability to do that I think has made the studio function really well. So as far as like being skillful, fine. I think skillful in design is just as important because people need to use this space without us being here, right? So it has to be skillful ergonomically. It has to be laid out right. We can see each other, right? That all has to work without us. The lighting all works. It's all pointed where that all has to work without us, right? So there's an intelligence to that as well. And I think that's kind of like a cool part of mastery. Because we're business owners, you know, like the facility is its own thing. Our skill aside, the facility has to have its own intelligence, you know? Exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of a neat way to look at it too. I love design stuff and, you know, the front door with the spikes, all that stuff, you know, like just dealing with people moving and all that. I just think that's a really interesting part of operating a business, you know.
That's awesome.
Systems.
It's all about systems and building systems that other people can step into.
Yeah, sure.
So going back kind of to the story, so you guys linked up and you partnered up. Did you start, is that when Gradwell House started or was it kind of like, did you have it started officially, Steve, like as a business and then Dave came in or did you get together and then start it?
We didn't LLC until after we had been together for about a year.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? Does that sound right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, maybe like from what I remember, somewhere in the second year of you being in Gloucester City is when you hit me up.
But we were only there for 2 years, right? So it was real quick we left there.
Yeah, so I think it was like in the 9-month range that I was there. I kind of remember, you know? And then towards the end of that year is when we talked about moving out of there, getting a space and kind of making that formality. So 2004, February of 2004, I know I have to look at it so often.
And I would have definitely absolutely never LLC'd. I would have kept it all an all cash business for as long as humanly possible.
You regret that?
No, not at all. You know, the funny thing, when you talk to people that run businesses, our first accountant, he said this to us, and is a piece of advice we have heeded at all times. He's like, just take every single dollar you get and put it in the bank, and then take it out with your debit card or take it out with a withdrawal. He's like, just put every single dollar, cash or not, put it all in the bank. Don't spend any of it cash, put it all in the bank. And that we've done it. And what a great piece of advice. I've never been like worried we're going to mess up our taxes and go to jail.
Right,
I've
yeah.
never been like, I've never felt like we've done a single dishonest thing.
That's awesome.
Business wise. So yeah, it's like, it's funny. For teaching at Camden County, we have to take these every year. You have to take these refresher courses. And you have to take it's like a 20-minute infomercial thing that you watch and then you do a quiz. Bloodborne pathogens and weird stuff like that. But one of them is ethics. And I didn't go to college, so I didn't take any courses on ethics. I never had a class on business ethics. You're either like a good person or you're not, and it sort of applies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but what we do for these videos, because you have to take 4 of them, so it's like it can take you an hour and a half sometimes. You just skip through the whole video and then you just answer the questions, right? And you're just like, I know for sure I'm going to get 100% on the ethics quiz, right? And I think that's just because of this guy, Stan Alec, our first accountant. He just said that, and I was like, that sort of set me on that road of understanding, like, that's how you kind of like do everything.
Yeah.
You account for everything so that you never have to worry about, and your scheduling, everything, put it on paper. If you're doing scheduling and somebody calls you on the phone, when you hang up, text them what you just said so that there is a paper trail. And like that paper trail is important because you don't want to ever be the person you want to always be the person to be like, I'm sorry, man, I sent you that text. I didn't mess up. You messed up. Because, that's a big thing for people, knowing that you're not going to drop the ball. So, yeah, I don't know. I always like that part of it, too. I thought that was a good point of view from an accountant,
So did either of you guys have, business experience prior to starting this? I mean,
Not me. Did you have any, Dave?
Did you have any, Dave?
Well, I did. I set up. I set up an LLC for a record label that I did briefly, and I didn't have anything formal with our studio because, like I said, I viewed the studio as kind of like a creative wing of what we were trying to do. So we were mostly just working with bands that were like friends, like that kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Not thinking of it as a business unto itself per se. Even though I did charge people and make money off it.
Yeah.
Ironically, this probably helped kind of get me going with it a little bit, even though I wasn't really promoting or doing anything. Is that most of the bands that I worked with early on, because there were very few options, were good. Do you know what I mean? So, for instance,
I had the exact opposite experience.
Dude, the second recording I ever made, Steve, I can play for you, is just Dysrhythmia.
Oh, come on.
And
That's
it's
the
like,
second recording you made?
Yeah, and it's like,
I
it's
hate you.
good.
I know, I've heard
because they're good.
Yeah, right,
You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
right.
it was like, so I kind of like some of the early stuff I had, I remember hearing it on like, but then it went downhill.
Yeah, because you started working with me.
Yeah, it went downhill. No.
Well, that's the truth, though, right? Like, you got to do this. You got to play this weird game as a business. Where are you trying to maximize the amount of hours or maximize the amount of money per hour, right?
Sure.
And we played the maximizing the amount of hours for many, many years.
Yeah.
But it worked for us.
So when you start, go ahead, Dave.
No, that's fine.
Oh, when you started the LLC, was it for both of you then? Because it sounds like it's kind of a thing. Was it then like, okay, now it's official, we are a company? Or did it not feel, do you remember what it felt like? Or was it just like, we got to do this?
Well, I think that probably with the combination of it being like the newer space and stuff like that, and and again, for as like low tech, so to speak, compared to that space was, I think it did make an impression on people. Like it was a comfortable environment. It was kind of cool, I guess.
And that's a space that you were in, Etta. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The previous space. Mm-hmm.
So, but I guess we borrowed some money too, right? You know what I mean? So like we were actually like, and maximizing credit cards and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so,
I think that was part of it too. Was that must have been what I think our accountant was like. You need to get an LLC. You need to get a bank account. You need to put all your money in the bank account. Yeah. I bet you that's how that conversation probably went. Because I do remember it was like my wife's uncle is a doctor, and it's his accountant. So he ran his own. He was an entrepreneur, doctor, had his own practice, did all his own stuff. And my wife's like, you should talk to this guy.
Yeah.
He was good. He got us started.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So as the business has grown and the company has grown and everything you guys have done, I know now you're, like you said, you're teaching, you're doing live sound, you're on tour with bands.
Gig workers, man. Gig workers.
Just everything. And, again, you're wrapped in it from someone on the outside who's just kind of seen it over the last decade or so. It's really cool and exciting to see kind of the progression of it. Has it been exciting for you guys as it's kind of evolved? Or because I know business just has these times where it may look great, but it kind of sucks. There's moments where it's brutal,
Sure.
What has it been like, the experience of it?
Well, for me, I think that there was like some total years at 222. I'm sure Steve can understand this, as he was like touring more and doing more live sound, where there was a Groundhog Day element to it.
Yeah.
But that's also like, that's the classic 10,000 hour thing, is that I feel like I was joking during the beginning of the pandemic that I was kind of like acting surprised to myself, like, oh, I still have work every day. And I was like, you've been doing this every single day for I don't even know how many years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't remember a time that I didn't have something to mix or master in like 7 or 8 years, maybe.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
Like a completely clear plate.
Yeah, like it hasn't existed even through the pandemic. There's always been something, and like I think that's you stoked that, and I also stoked the part of the business where I wanted to be. My wife has preferred. Steve and Nicole have definitely a different vibe about this than Stacy and I. Stacy was very much like, I would very much prefer you to be home every single night. You kind of vibe, you know what I mean? Like I prefer that you had a job that had the same hours so we could kind of be around or whatever.
Gotcha.
So like I try to really make a lot of it be like post-production work as much as possible, like mixing and mastering, where I could be by myself, Yeah. So there was a lot of like, even up until pretty recently when I took the full-time teaching job, that, it was like always coming in here. And like the joke was I barely had my hours on the schedule because it was just like Matt knew I was going to be here. We just would figure out which room we were in. You know what I mean? Like even here. But yeah, I'm losing my tangent or a little bit here. So I guess, but I didn't realize as much. Like Steve and I talked to this, because we would kind of catch up at various points as he was touring, kind of coming back, where it was like we kind of got into this thing where I think with the old space, we really wanted to get out of there, but we were having trouble figuring out how that was going to happen, finding a space, everything like that. Our landlord was terrible. So I think, it's like I had a bunch of recordings and a bunch of things that were going really well, and I was feeling good about that, but feeling horrible about the space over there. Do you know what I mean? And Steve maybe even more so than me.
Yeah.
Because like I was kind of living in it a little bit, where I was just like trying to make the best of it and trying to focus on doing the work, and the fact that the work was going well and I was getting a lot of projects and doing a lot of stuff. But
and then I come home from tour and all I see is the splashes of iced tea behind the trash can and the carpets all
stained. You start
stained.
kicking things over and yelling at everybody?
No, but like it is funny, like having that going on the road and then coming home. Well, firstly to this place, right? You come home and we spent 2 years building the place, so I was here almost every day for a long stretch. And then to go away for a month or two, you come back and you walk in, I'm like, oh my, this is my place? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it really, and it doesn't like kind of feel like that. It feels authentically like that. I'm just like, wow, because we put a lot of time in, and if you're here too much, you kind of forget how cool it is. Yeah. Because other people walk in, every time they walk in, they're like, whoa, and you're like, yeah, whoa. But then like sometimes I can walk behind them and you just kind of see what they're seeing. Yeah. And you're like, okay, this place is pretty awesome. But the previous space, I think one of the things that made it really difficult, we didn't own it. And you can, because our business is not just about us, it's about the facility as well. It gets a little bit disheartening where you don't feel like you can bring in that next level of clients because it's kind of moldy, or you can't, you know what I mean? Or just because the space isn't really how you want it. And it's that, it stops you from thinking you can do good work because you think that it's going to affect how people think about your work, your space, But this doesn't do that at all. Awesome. This, I have no, you just walk anybody through. It's like, it sounds terrible in here, but look how cool it looks, Like you can almost sell it just on how it looks, and thank God it sounds good. But
what are some of the clients or projects you guys have been working on the last, 4 or 5 years that are exciting, or that you thought were like, wow, this is awesome?
I mean, literally, man, one of the things that I've been doing, I told Steve about this a couple days ago, where I was just like, I've been forcing myself to go back and listen to stuff because it really, I mean, at least for me, like I almost have lost track of something. Like, I don't know, like a pandemic brain or something where I'm just like, what was I doing? Yeah. But I mean, the cool thing about this space is we've been doing some stuff, for instance, like Matt and I did some recording for Splice recently. Oh, cool. Where there's, you're doing some stuff where we're getting involved with people that are doing kind of live sampling, because Splice is becoming kind of a huge, I don't know if you're familiar with it, in the hip hop world, right? Yeah. So that's been pretty interesting. We had an artist, Mitski, that was here like a couple years back that had a really,
that song was huge.
Yeah. And that was a #1 Pitchfork record. And the biggest song that she was done here.
That's awesome.
And
I forgot about that. So that's always a good one. I always forget about Mitski.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I did a bunch of records with that band Beach Slang that did really, really well. And that kind of crossed over into here. They did the last recording that I did with them a couple years back in this studio as well. But it's funny because maybe one of the reasons why my brain has changed a little bit is because I'm like, I haven't really been here. And I basically started working at home. So the big irony that I keep telling people about is that I spent years and years and years, and then we finally get stuff where we're like really like refining it. And then I'm just like, all right, cool, peace.
Yeah, I'll be at my house.
Tap out, Speaking of what Steve was talking about with feeling like really comfortable and confident, So anyway, to Steve's point about clients, what's nice now is that like one of the things that I've been really big on trying to do since we moved in here, one of the big goals is to round up as many freelance engineers as possible. So we've had a ton of people through here. And by and large, a lot of them love it.
Wow.
So we're getting this thing now, for instance, Mike Tarja, who's the former Sigma Sound owner, has been working here, and he gives us a lot of high praise. He's like, I always tell people it's like Sigma used to be. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Like the technical level, the cleanliness, the professionalism of the staff. You know what I mean? They're kind of like on that range.
That's got to feel amazing.
Oh,
though.
totally.
I mean,
yeah, because like I said, I mean, we our old space, to kind of put a further exclamation point on what Steve was saying, our last space did not reflect our professionalism. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
It really didn't. And I think that this space reflects our professionalism. You know what I mean? Easily.
Yeah, that's good. I'll have to remember that, how to say it that way, because that really is like exactly what it is. Because you're like, I know we'll blow any recording you're doing anywhere else out of the water, but it just looks kind of gross.
Yeah,
and it didn't even look that gross.
But what Steve was saying about the idea of the sound and the aesthetic thing, like we know for ourselves and for other people that stuff matters. You know what I mean? That like
it does.
You have to come in and you have to impress people like at every juncture. And so it's like we aim to take care of all the tech stuff, sonic stuff, but then like I had this laundry list, or we had this laundry list of things, just like the monitoring, where it's like, nope, got to keep going here. This is where we're gonna go next. You know what I mean? Like having this, I 100% know where I'd like to see things.
Yeah.
Just like the thing recently with getting jazz and with getting gospel and more of that stuff, where the space is nice. I know we can do a great job. Now we have a great piano. It's like, just give us the chance,
Yeah.
And that's been happening because that was been like a conscious effort to try to get that in. Do you know what I mean? To find people, and Steve and I think, I didn't used to know how to network, but he's good at it. And like, I've learned how to do it. And I think that over these years, we've got a Venn diagram, we have a lot of crossover, but there's also a ton of people that we bring in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Just like me, it's nice because then you get where I go to Drexel, I meet this whole crew,
right?
And then I can introduce Steve over here, or a couple of the people know Steve. You know what I mean? But then it's, I don't know.
It is weird how the network goes, because it is, and too the same with touring, right? Because then those people end up wanting to come in and play, or they're doing full production
Snowball
rehearsals.
effect, man.
Yeah, and it's and the rehearsals downstairs. People always ask with the rehearsals as part of the business. It's like, oh yeah, so like you get the people to go rehearse downstairs and then they come up and record, and it's actually not like that at all. It's like 90% of those people don't record here. Huh. So what a weird thing, right? Because I was like, yeah, that makes sense. It'll be like conveyor belt of nope, it's not a thing. So what a strange,
Well, it does
for the hourly rehearsals.
Yeah, it does work sometimes. But
no, sometimes, but it really is the exception.
But I was actually talking about this earlier in my I have a Drexel class I teach about running a recording studio, and one of the things I was saying to them is I said, Stephen, we've talked about this. Steve and I have a bunch where there's certain things in this industry that you can promote very directly. The rehearsals you can promote very directly in a very traditional way, where you could advertise them. You could be like,
right,
do you need rehearsal?
Because you're not selling yourself.
Yeah. Whereas the studio thing can be a little bit tougher because, like as everybody, it's like you can even come up for a record organically. I've had these situations where people are just like, I heard this record, it sounds amazing. And then you meet them and you talk and you think it's going well, and then they go do it with somebody else. And it's, a very different record. And you have to really learn to deal with that actor level of rejection that you always go through.
Yeah.
But
nowhere near what actors go through.
Right. But the thing is, though, is that, one of the points I was making in my class today is I said, we very consciously, the idea with this place is like, there's the diversity of revenue stream.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So those hourlies plus the monthlies plus the studio business plus all the aspects of the studio business that we can do really adds together well, but we don't even need it to work that synergistically.
Right. They're independent. Okay.
Yeah, they can be if need be. You know.
So what percentage of your business would you say now is the rentals? And just for those listening, they have the downstairs, the rental rooms. You'll rent out monthly, some hourly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Up until we'll talk about it in a moment, but up until very recently.
What percentage is studio to rentals?
Basically for a while, it was kind of like, obviously we've been a studio a lot longer, but there was kind of like a 60-40, and on a good month there could be like a 50-50, meaning that the studio has an easier time because the hourly rate's higher.
Yeah.
So if you were to get A and B going, it can make more money that way.
Sure.
But the goal was, if we can get the downstairs to cover all the base overhead,
nice.
Like that's a huge victory.
That's,
do you know what I mean? So that Steve and I could take the
pressure.
profit.
The pressure's off too.
So I mean, we got to this point pre-pandemic that we actually had a passive income from the studio, kinda.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where we didn't necessarily need to be doing studios, which is kind of like, and we can get back there, but that was like an amazing feeling, I think, right? Where it's like, we could actually just make a little bit of money off this without like 12 hours a day kind of thing. And again, that's a little bit false in the sense that I'm putting in tons of hours, like doing shit all the time. But at the same time, like I don't know. Yeah, it's this mix of business. The downstairs though, I mean, the hourly rehearsals, everything was kicking butt pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So how the downstairs worked was it's 9 rooms. 3 of them were hourly rehearsals. So people come in, they book 2 hours a night. So you get in one room, you would get maybe 2 different bands, 4 hours total. But we had 3 rooms like that. So the pandemic hits, and we went from every room having between 2 and 4 hours 5 nights a week to all of the rooms having 0 hours 7 nights a week, like zero
for
bookings,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So that's fine. It is what it is. And what we've always done, you just got to pivot, do some thinking, do some talking. And we got lucky that somebody else that was sort of like moving out of their studio, we were able to transition a couple of the rooms to be a recording studio control room, like one of the control rooms, like where Dave is.
Yeah.
It's probably closer to that size.
Wow.
And then it has a big room attached to it that's probably the size of this as an isolation booth. So they have a full production suite downstairs.
That's awesome.
So that's 2 of the rooms that were vacant. And then we lost a couple of our monthly people a couple of people that do recording studio, do production rooms that are like a little recording studio, and then bands that have a room where they play. They rent it for the month, and they can play as much as they want. And we lost 1, 2 of those, 3 of those.
3.
We lost 3 of those, but now are we at full?
Yeah, I mean, we basically we kept 8. So one
Yeah,
of
we
the
kept
one of the
one- yeah, we
rooms
kept
I've been
one.
pleading with Steve for years to make one of the rooms storage, because we built basically this entire space to be making money, so we just didn't
No
want
storage.
to dedicate storage.
Wait, I swear to
That's a
God, it was
problem.
like actually in the plan.
Yeah.
I was like, we had all this. It's like, if we can't fit it somewhere, let's just throw it out,
Yeah.
because we're not going to have a space that doesn't make us money
But our
anymore.
architect is like, listen, I have to put on here this is storage, or they're going to question
For sure.
where you're going to put everything. You know what I mean? We're like a studio. You can just put it in there. He's like, no, I'm saying, like, if I don't put storage on here, you're going to get pushback, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, so basically where we're at right now is that, like Steve said, we had multiple bands move out, right? That obviously weren't doing anything now. And then what we did do, which is kind of something we wanted to do from the very beginning, is we got producer engineers in. And the producer engineer thing is synergistic, because they're going to be downstairs, but they need the upstairs every once in a while.
Yeah.
So that actually is like a better maneuver in some ways, where we can now look at it like, okay, maybe our net down there, we're losing out with the hourly rooms, but those rooms are bringing us back up. But then if they come upstairs and use it, we're back on top, kind of idea. You know, like we can get back to that amount of revenue easily.
Well, it's awesome. I in my season 1, I met with a studio engineer. He built a recording studio, about a 1,500 square foot, kind of additional to this brand new. He was booked out solid for years. But one of the things 2 things. One is, I would ask him, well, what's the big play?
Right.
And I love that you guys have it set up where this could become some passive income and take pressure off at least. So,
right.
And then you can bring your engineers in. I mean, that was a big problem in this industry. I think you're kind of you're stuck to the board, but you guys have found a way to get out of it eventually.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's probably what Steve and I definitely understand. I'm sure is that, like, the way that we got into this is being involved, playing in bands, being like a natural network where you meet people. That's what freaks me out when I always talk with like Drexel students. I'm like, do you know anybody?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if you're playing in a band and like you already got friends, like, oh, cool, you're fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine for a little bit.
Yeah,
know what I mean?
like you get how networking works even if you don't know that you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like it is scary if people are like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? So we recognize that the engineers, it's eventually always going to have to kick like a generation. Like there's everybody, has that kind of moment where you're like, particularly if you only in one little scene or trend, that you're going to either age out of it or that scene or trend is going to not happen or it's going to splinter. I mean, Steve and I have been through metalcore. Like metalcore almost
true.
ended it for us.
Yeah.
Like we kind of just thought that was all we were going to work with. I mean, like for a hot minute, it didn't last long. It was like an 8-month period, I think. Like hardcore punk, we were like completely fine with.
Yeah,
Steve's really good at it. But like when metalcore hit, I was like, I don't know how to make this work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It really, that was like, it is funny when a genre comes around that is just not for you, you just do not get what it is supposed to sound like. And that's like the thing that you're trying to teach people almost is like, you just have to like inherently get what it's supposed to sound like. And so then you have good ears. Like, I don't know how to give you good ears. You're just, you know what I mean? Like, start turning knobs. And when you get to the finishing point, if it sounds good, then you have good ears. And if you get to the finishing point, it sounds bad, you don't. I don't know how else to say it to people, you can critically listen to things. But I felt like that was one of those genres where
Gonna destroy you.
it just was an impossible situation because I don't know if any engineer that ever recorded it found the right sound for it. And I, for sure, was not the right engineer.
Well, I mean, yeah.
So that's where I was.
That was also one of those things, too, I'd say, where it was like that stuff was, we obviously come from a generation and an aesthetic that looks at sampled drums, right, and stuff like that, like really suspect. Like, we're just kind of like, no.
Yeah.
Like I can hear it. It sounds dumb.
Yeah.
And so that genre, we were unwilling, like completely fake kind of thing. And that's like kind of what it needed to sound like for the genre and for the audience, But I mean, that's where stuff also, if you want to talk about like different revenue streams, like stuff like mastering works out great, where we can get people in here and I can work on genres because mastering doesn't care. Like as far as the genre as much, it's like I need to be
it's got
familiar.
less of a soul.
But I need to figure out what the end result needs to sound like to fit in with what's going on. But hopefully the mix will kind of tell me that a little bit, And then of course again I do a lot of listening to make sure that I'm not way off the mark. But at the same time, I mean, we've smartly. I think Steve's known this more intuitively than me, but it's like there's definitely stuff you don't want to go after.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, and I think any business that you run, right? There's this certain kind of client, and you see people happily deal with those clients.
Yeah,
cool, have them. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you take them.
How do you know when it is one of those clients? You don't know?
No. Okay. No, you don't. Not until you got to do something with them first. I mean, I would like to say that I have an innate ability to sniff out people, but I think that times where people have really, I feel like there's been a flare. I've been right in the end. Like when something where my spidey sense kicks in about something, I'm just like, I really, really don't want to do that thing.
Yeah.
And I've been right in the end, but it's, you don't know. And, Dave and I developed, I don't know how much it works for the whole world, but for band people, man, there's only like 10 different types, right?
Yeah,
you're not definitely one of those 10 types, but if you're a type in a band, you're one of the 10.
And
Oh, the 10 are great. Yeah. It's so much fun. Just like, and not every band has them. But when a band has one, you're like, oh, I got a sad guy.
Give me an example.
Sad guy is the best one. That's the most prevalent one. Sad guy. All right, so sad guy is really high energy. So a lot of people don't know how sessions work, but usually how a lot of sessions work is you record the drums first. So the drummer goes in with like the bass player or the good guitar player because there's usually a good one and a bad one. And they'll play the song. We'll just say they're doing one song. They'll play the song all the way through. And then everybody goes back and puts on headphones, and the drummer and that good guitar player sit down. And then everybody else goes and plays their parts with the headphones on without any visuals or anything. They just listen to the drums and the bass or guitar, and they play along. That's called overdubbing. That's how we do it. So a lot of times when you're tracking, you track like 10 songs of drums, right? So you'll do like a whole day where you got drums all day, drums and that one bass player all day. And you got this cheerleader guy in the control room, the guitar player, the lead guitar player, he's going to play guitar last because his stuff is the least like crucial to the rhythm, know? So he's in there cheerleading all day, and they're just high energy, and they're a lot of fun. And then
The sad guy?
that sad guy. But you don't know that that's sad guy yet.
Because he's high energy. You
Yeah,
can't
because
tell.
he's pumped. You're like, cool, I got a cheerleader. They're fun to talk to. You're actually like really enjoying the time that you're spending with them in the control room.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because you can talk. You got to keep it low. You can talk while the band's playing. So you spend, let's say it's a weekend session. You spend Saturday doing the drums. You got the guy with you, the happy guy, high energy. So then it comes to Sunday. It's time for him to track his guitars. Well, he's the worst guitar player in the band, and you didn't know. And he's also super self-conscious that just sits on the chair and plays guitar all sad, and you can't make him laugh, and the person that you knew that entire 24 hours previously gone, forever gone. Like it's almost like you never get him back. And that's sad guy is very prevalent in bands. You know that's true, dude. Sad guy.
How long does it take you to get an identity for these guys?
Oh, instantly.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Yeah, at this point, I would think, I was surprised that Steve hesitated to talk about his innate sense, because I think, Ete and Steve and anyone else listening, I mean, I cannot express how many people we've dealt with. I mean, like how many bands.
Oh, it's just
like
thousands.
It is a lot. So if because I was talking to my students the one day, and I was like, I think we recorded drums like 6 or 7 times this week. Like, there's just a lot of different stuff happening here, right? So you're exposed to tons of people. And Steve's definitely right that there are types for sure. You know, I heard him quite eloquently put sad guy out there, like the specificity, the bipolar aspect of
sad guy is like this hopeful thing. Sad guy brings the session up, and then sad guy absolutely slits its throat the next day. You're like, sad guy, why did you ruin it for everyone?
Sad guy could be tricky guy.
What's tricky guy?
Well, it just tricks you. He comes in with the energy, and then you.
And sad guy never. What I don't think sad guy has ever ended up being a really good player, because it's usually like the playing struggles that bring sad guy out. Like if sad guy got in there and ripped guitar like they ripped jokes the previous day, they would be it wouldn't. That's why sad guy happens.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
No. I was going to say, sad guy is mostly, based on Steve's description, not a lifer. So, you know what I mean? Sad guy will get dumped at the first possible moment that the band is going somewhere. It sounds like, you know.
It sounds like they're going to break up and then reform without him, is what it sounds like.
Yeah. and it sounds like that has happened to both of us.
Yo, no, I'm not. This is a true story. I was in a band for a long time with all these guys, and they formed another band, and the band was called Minus, and it was Minus Steve.
Okay, so you've been on that end of it.
I've been. Yeah. It was early. It was early
Okay.
in you know. I feel like the band that broke up was like some ridiculously terrible band, so it didn't matter. But it was when I found that out, I was like, oh, okay. I can even be the focus when I'm not around. I understand. I understand.
Yeah, you got the power.
I like this power. Yeah, that's nice.
That's amazing.
Can you guys give us a piece of advice for musicians? Like, you see so many artists come in and so, from all different places. Some think, this next album's going to be the biggest thing, and maybe it is. Some, whatever it is. But I'd love for you to pass on a piece of, like, for an up-and-coming artist that's going to come in here in their first recording. What advice would you give them?
I was gonna say, Ete, and I mean, this sounds like old head of me, but I don't know. I mean, are we talking just about recording, or you think just general?
I think just general as a musician. Like, I don't know if it's in the expectations, if it's in the who you are, the connection, but just as a musician.
I think I've been this person, but there really isn't a thought of the before and after of making the recording. Like, after you finish it, what you're actually doing with it, and they don't ever seem to learn the lesson. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, I realized after a while, I'm like, because, and this is coming from myself, where I actually did attempt and did promote a band and toured and things like that. And so did Steve, where you actually put your best foot forward. You were actually trying to promote what you were doing. You were trying to get it to go somewhere. And I do think it sounds very cliche, but I do think I've come across a lot of people, not just starting out, but they spend the better part of a decade or two not ever understanding why things are not doing anything. It's going to be in part, obviously, about the music itself, but I'm actually struck at talking to, say, somebody who's maybe in their mid-30s or something, that they don't know where to go with it. Do you know what I mean? Or what to do with it. Do you know what I mean? That there's no sense of, like, okay, well, you're in a band. All right, you see there's other bands. Like, where are you trying to get? You know what I mean?
Is that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, I think it is to some degree, Steve. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know what I mean? There's nobody, for whatever reason, a lot of bands don't seem to have, like, Steve and I, in our respective bands played similar roles, but I would imagine almost every band would have somebody like that. But I have seen that bands seem to have somebody to lead the charge, but there's a lot of them that don't get the promotional aspect of it. They don't get the aspect of the legwork or the back end of it.
They think it's just make the album and then what's next?
And I mean, it sounds really like, you got to focus on your singles. And, But at the same time, like I've seen it, the repetition of it. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen people kind of relatively close to us too, that there's just not an understanding. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And the flip of that is that I'm seeing some people, like for instance, like you take somebody like Louis, and this guy Matt Fell that he works with, where you're almost seeing like them get really smart about it, where they're going, no, I don't need to make 25 songs. Like this is what the industry's always been saying. Like I need to make one song, but make sure I like really ride that song.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That I really treat that as like, yeah, no, I spent $5,000 on it because I really care to promote this and to make this thing the best thing that it is.
Yeah, and you don't move on from it because you're bored. Because you're bored of your song.
Exactly, man.
It's not what it's about. You're going to get bored of your song. You don't think Mariah Carey's bored of her songs? Get real.
Totally. Like Steve and I were talking the other day, I tell you, where like now, like that her record, I didn't even know this because obviously it's, generationally like a different scene, but like she released.
You're talking about William Eilish?
Yeah, William. But she had released those songs on that album in like single and EP form. So they'd have multiple releases.
Wow.
And then the album was released. And I was saying to Steve, I'm like, yo, from our era, we'd be like, no, man, it was already done. It was released artistically.
You never re-recorded a song. You never re-released it.
I'm not putting that EP with that EP. It doesn't sound the same. You know what I mean? Like that one's better. That one's gonna make that one worse. Like it's like I still have like this like ugh.
Yeah, you're handicapping yourself.
But,
it's so
you
dumb.
totally are.
Yeah.
Whereas the industry's always been like that's why like records. I always bring up the Killers. Their first record sounds like mayhem. Because there's like 4 tunes that recorded in rehearsal, and the record's like, these are perfect. You know what I mean? And then there's like songs that are really well produced, but they're like, these are perfect. These are all great. And it's just like, it's a mess.
What's that voice? W's that?
It's like a Harvey Weinstein.
Is it the label guy? Oh, yeah.
It's something gross. It's something it's something money before all else. But ultimately what I'm saying is like, I think that, not understanding what that mechanism like looks like, and I know that like not everybody's going to have that needs to go to the stars or whatever, but even understanding like what the indie rock like business is like. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like understanding who the people you would be playing with, the venues you would be playing. Like it's really.
And it makes sense. If you're going to put this much thought, time, money, energy into it, you ought to have a plan. You ought to have at least some idea of something.
Yeah.
I didn't always have a plan though, so whatever.
Yeah, but you know what? But Steve, you said organic earlier, right?
Yeah.
Where like I think in our day, but when we were playing in bands, I think it was also like, well, we're not playing with that band. That band's not cool.
Right.
You're playing with that band.
Right.
Like they're cool. Like, and there's not only a handful of them.
So there's a strategy.
Yeah, there's absolutely a strategy.
Yeah.
Or it's like if we can open for that, or if we can play here, if we can get a tour down here.
Yeah, well, what is that though?
Yeah. Strategery?
No, but I'm saying, how do you instill that in people? Like, how do you even like how do you say that in a sentence to somebody to inspire them?
Totally.
It's tough. Yeah. It's a tough one.
It's really funny, man, because like I'm teaching a production class this semester, and literally what I was telling them, I'm like, this seems like a really weird thing, but I'm actually that's what I'm trying to do.
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to get them in action.
You.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to, what I mean, which is like Steve said, is really goofy. I mean, it's an inherent quality in production. Like you, as a producer, you want to like, yo, come on,
Yeah.
But yeah, that I don't see people that that would be a big one.
Steve, you want to take a stab at that one?
My thing, and Dave and I talked about this, and this has been a thing that has carried me through very many times where you feel loyalties are questionable with people you've worked with in the past and people that you want to work with and people you've had conversations with, and about feeling the sting of competition when there's other studios or there's other businesses kind of doing maybe exactly what you're doing or doing something real similar. And when in our industry, when we were first starting out, the hourly rate was the gold standard for the quality, right? There was no other real way to judge quality of a studio. It was kind of like you looked at all the studios that cost this much an hour, and they all were the same quality. That's what you assumed, right? There was very little way to suss it out. You had to go and check out the studios and stuff. But you kind of forget when you're doing a business, you kind of treat it like it's your band. If that's all you know is business, your band is your business. You covet your band, and you're so protective of it. Mm-hmm. And when you do that with your business, when you do that with a studio, because there are these other studios and people love variety, they go to other studios, Mm-hmm. And the thing that we learned is that if you do a good job and you don't worry about everybody else, they always come back.
Love it.
That's it, right? So just do a good job. Know that you're doing as good a job as you're capable of doing, that you didn't cut any corners, and then you don't feel bad. And it took us a long time. It took me a very long time to like really, really accept that as the truth. You know what I mean? Like I could say it as much as I wanted, but then like I had an instance a couple years ago where I lost a really good gig that I had for 4 years, and I was very bummed about it. And I didn't tell anybody for weeks. You know, I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm kind of embarrassed. And so then I told Dave, I was like, I got fired from this gig. And he's like, ooh. And I was like, yeah. And I didn't really get any closure from having that conversation with him, but he was the only person. Honestly, only he and my wife really knew about it. And then a couple weeks went by, and it was a band, band I had toured with. And I was their tour manager. I was their a number one guy. And then after maybe like 3 weeks of having been fired from this band, as their sound engineer, I get a text. Hey, in 3 weeks, can you come mix us for this morning show on CBS in New York? And I just wrote back, I'm like, this is Steve Poponi, right? Because I was like, hey,
You fired me.
Yeah. And he laughed. He said, yeah. So I hung up. I said, yes, of course I wanted to do it. So I hung up and I called Dave, or maybe I saw Dave later that day, and I just like, they always come back.
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, they called me. They want me for a gig. And you just remember, right? Because you know why? Because I always did a good job.
Love it.
Right? So even if you rub weird personalities, even if you have sometimes you do drop the ball, right? But if you prove that you are always dependable, they always come back. It's a thing that is just, it is truth. I don't doubt it in any way, right?
And it's great in everything, whether you're a musician or a company or whatever. Dave, what piece of business advice would you give to someone who says, hey, I want to start a company?
Well, definitely in this one, this is definitely one of those businesses that the classic idea of if you build it, they will come is 100% not true.
Oh, it's the most untrue thing for studios.
Thing you've ever heard, because it really is built. I mean, this place was built on, obviously now Matt as well, but Steve and then myself and then Matt, and like, it would not have. Again, this place wouldn't be here if we didn't record for all those years, kind of thing.
You couldn't just drop this place in the middle of some city that didn't have a studio and just boom, it's doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I tell this like anecdote in my recording studio class, and I don't know if you remember this, Steve, but I was working by myself one day at the old space. And this guy just popped in our old space. You remember, you kind of walked in and like you'd be like right, the engineer would be in the room and you'd be like right there in the doorway.
Yep.
So it's just like this dude, totally random guy. I'm like, can I help you? And he's like, I heard there was a studio here. I was like, yeah. And he's like, I just wanted to get like some advice on building a studio. And I was like, okay, fair enough, and I was
I
like,
guess that's where you'd go.
Yeah, so I was like, which generally would seem kind of odd because you feel like it's like Steve said, a competitive thing,
competition.
But it was funny because we walked in and he started talking about all the floating floors and everything that he was doing, right, or planning to do in his studio. And I was kind of like, yeah, like we rented this space. It's on slab. We're on the foundation here. Like we're not, there's nothing low enough can resonate this. So like with an understanding of technically what's happening with soundproof, we knew our limitations in our old space, right? But we also knew that our space, particularly for what we were doing, is incredibly workable. So what I'm trying to say is that like this was a guy talking to me where I didn't really have much sense that he knew a lot about studios. Like he knew some technical stuff, but he was planning on floating, which is not cheap. Right, particularly if he's having somebody else build a floating system for him. Sure. Again, not that it's going to be millions of dollars or anything, but he was planning on doing some serious build out. Right, I've never heard of this guy. Never heard of any recordings he ever done. I never heard of the plan. Like it was a new venture, and it's like that has nothing to do with anything. Like you have, like
that
just
will
like
get you zero clients.
Like you just
that's it. That's the answer.
You have to have clients. Like you have to be able to do something and. Like
this guy's floating floor sounds so good.
Yeah, but we're I mean, like we would not have done. We didn't have to because it costs a fortune. Do you know what I mean? So it's like we did it because we knew we needed to create separation between this level and the lower level because the business couldn't coexist without it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? We didn't want to just do it.
Just because.
If we could have not done it, hell yeah, we would have not done it.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're always devil advocate with one another about these things. Like, do we have to do this? It's like, and then this place was built on we'd be dumb if we didn't do it. we got to do it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was that was the mantra. But like that thing about recording, I mean, particularly but that is like that idea, like, you know, like I was talking about the guy I work with at Drexel, Ryan Schwab, where I was mentioning how he had mentioned to me at one point that he kind of wanted to do what we were doing, Steve, where he wanted to get control rooms built and like bring in Joe and everybody, you know. And I was like, oh, that's great. But like all I was thinking was like, Ryan, like you're making so much money in your apartment mastering and mixing for people, and you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
You've got a gig at Drexel. Like I can't even imagine how much money you're making every year because your overhead is nothing.
Right.
You know, like this is not that this is the dumbest thing. We're doing something different, and we also needed this because we're making records. He does like EDM and mastering.
Yeah.
He needs one room.
Yeah, just
You know
stay
what I mean?
there.
Yeah, just stay there. That's like such an amazing business plan.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
what people go back to that.
Yeah, you
that's
know,
what people start out like that and they
everybody
go
else
back to
that's
it.
what they're doing. Like I'm working at home. I have a third control room now. Like that I work in every day at home. That's adding more revenue to this. That isn't costing us. Well, I mean, other than the gear we got, once that's paid for, which is pretty much, then there you go. We have another control room, and so it's like, you know, that's the model moving forward. It's not this, but we have a unique thread, I think, that makes this work. You know what I mean? Or a unique kind of business sense, I guess, in our industry to kind of like, because I know all of the other studios just imploded. All the old ones that were built, high real estate markets,
Right.
cities, rent abatement, you know, mortgage. Once that hit, they all close. You know, so like one after another. And if they can't necessarily find somewhere to move to kind of like reinvigorate their business plan, like they're done, you know, or at least the studio's done. The engineer can pick up and do something different. So say that person used to do sessions, now they're only mixing.
Right.
That kind of idea. That's fine. But at the same time, doing something like this, I'll go back to what I was saying. Like we're never even going to get here without steady stream of clients for years and years and years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even then, it's near impossible.
I love it.
You know?
Get the work. Don't. Yeah. If it's not true, if they build it, they will come.
Yeah, it
Right.
isn't. No
That's
one
awesome.
cares.
Although
you know?
although I bet if I didn't start in my basement, I probably would have had better clients sooner.
Yeah, I can
You
see
know,
that.
like that probably
Yeah,
it probably did hinder like exponential growth. You know, not having like a place to really grow back then, but it also made it so that, man, I would find cash in my pant pockets like every 2 days. You know what I mean? I was just because I lived in my house. It was nothing. It was no
Yeah.
rent. I think I made it to the point of where I was living with 3 guys that paid like all but $150 of the rent, and I had the whole basement and a bedroom, and I was paying $150 a month, and all of the studio revenue came to me. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that was. I remember moving out. I was like, $700. How am I going to pay $700 a month? It's insane.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I really do remember that being like the scariest number ever. But
Steve, do you have anything else to add as far as a piece of advice?
no, I mean, there's technical stuff for recording studio people that I think is really like a good thing. But it probably applies. I think get really good at one thing. You know, a lot of problems that you see with recording engineers is that when they're starting out, they try to do like. You try to do what you see the pros do. You're trying to do 10 mics on a drum set. Do 1 mic on a drum set, dude. Until you can make that sound awesome, guess what? You're going to have 9 crappy sounding mics if you can't make 1 sound good. How are you going to make 9 sound good? So make 1 mic sound great on a kit, and that's how you how you learn it. But I think, you know, all of the crafty trade businesses are like that. Get one tool and master it, right?
Yeah.
So
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other thing like that we did too that we didn't this might have actually hindered us. This is just slightly technical, but we decided against getting like a big console like this like years ago, right? And we went very minimal with our setup, and we always believed that like, you know, I'm assuming you agree with this, Steve, but I mean it was very intentional of us of being a very minimal studio.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like just getting the tools. We believed in the computer. We believed in the investment in that. So,
and if the tool can't do 10 things, then get the other tool that can do 10 things.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like really maximize that. Definitely get a tool that's got. We never want to get something that's just good on one thing.
Yeah,
that
no
seems like
one
such a
trick
waste. You know.
Yeah.
So we invested in a really like nimble toolkit, so to speak. You know, that we were able to in our old space because our overhead was a lot lower, completely own. So we showed up here with a lot of equipment, you know, that we weren't in debt. You know,
That's-
that was one of the plans there
yeah.
that I had years ago. It's like, if we get all the tools when we go to move to a new space, yeah, we're going to have to invest in all the infrastructure, which is overwhelming, but we don't have to like buy a whole bunch of gear as well.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why, like, if you have a situation where you're working at home or you have a cheaper, studio environment like we did over there, that's a really good thing to just kind of like get that out of the way. Do you know what I mean? So that you're able, because that stuff travels.
Oh,
Yeah.
mic stands?
Yeah.
Dude, we started buying like real nice mic stands early on, even though it's just so much easier to buy the cheap ones because
Yeah.
they're like a third of the price.
I've done it.
But the nice ones they last forever. There is no replacement cost because they don't break, you know? So it's like you learn that stuff. Headphone extensions, I remember that was a big thing. Don't buy the $10 headphone extension. Buy the $30 one.
Yeah.
You think it's going to kill you. It's
get
3
the
times
right tools.
it's going to last you 10 times. It's crazy. You feel like such a fool looking back on the money you spent. Headphone, man, I wish I had invested in those back in the day. Headphone extensions, HOSA, those lasted one session.
My last kind of business side question is just where do you guys, again, from the outside, it looks like you've made it. You're killing it. It's really exciting. Where do you hope this to go? I mean, you've been doing it for 2 decades. Are we looking at another 2 decades, more engineers taking over, you guys focusing on the managing of the lower side, maybe more studios, or what do you hope to do?
I mean, I already have sort of a minimal like role in the recording of bands. I'm more of like do the fixing of stuff, and
Right.
if we're changing the rooms over, so I'm doing like the construction stuff to do that. But it's weird times too because it's COVID, so everybody's doing weird stuff right now.
Yeah.
Right.
But in any case, I think ultimately, we're 44. We're only 4 days apart, 3 days apart.
Yep.
So we're 44 now. Figure we'll be here for at least 20 or 25 years, right? It can be an old man's game. You can be 70 and still have good ears. But in any case, I think for me, and I think Dave and I have even talked about it, it would be so cool to like at retirement age have a young engineer or a couple of young engineers want to buy the studio from us and then just retire on that, or maybe keep it and just retire on the income that it makes if we can lease it out. But there's the business and the building, 2 separate things, and we own them both. So they don't have to stay tied together. We could still own the building, but then let somebody lease the studio. So that's that would be cool. Because like as an entrepreneur, there's no 401k, so
Right.
that's a lot of my early and a lot of time that I spent doing this. My wife has super supported me. You know what I mean? Like she's been able to do. I wouldn't have had healthcare for this whole time if it weren't for her. That's awesome. So it's a huge cost that you'd like. That's a part of like entrepreneurs are always so boastful about what I did all this great stuff. It's like, yeah, but listen, I could not have done this without my wife. Like, period.
That's always the case. Is there's always someone
Oh
behind
yeah,
it.
dude.
Yeah.
And it's like and people are just like I remember when I went to an entrepreneur thing, just doing sound. I actually got hired for a gig, and the guy that invented Priceline was there. Like he's a billionaire.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it was big, but it was kind of a jokey, like self-helpy entrepreneur thing. And I had to do this break off room, and it was entrepreneurs. It was 4 entrepreneurs sitting up at a panel and people asking questions, maybe like a dozen people asking questions. People ask a bunch of questions. It kind of peters out. There's like 30 minutes left. And I was like, all right, well, I mean, I'm sitting at the soundboard working. I'll ask a question. I don't care. Raise my hand. Oh, what's your question? I was like, hey, I'm Steve. I'm actually doing the sound today for this event. But I'm an entrepreneur. I own a studio, blah, blah, blah. What do you guys do about health insurance and retirement? And no answers. They stalled out every answer. I don't have it. I'm not paying for it. I'm just taking a risk.
Wow.
The houses, and they were all like real estate type people. They were like, oh, the real estate I have is my fallback. Like, this is my, like, Jesus, that's not smart, and I remember just being kind of like flabbergasted at the answers. Like, and they could, as it was going down the line, each person's were just getting lamer and lamer.
Oh man.
And these were like the panelists, And so then it gets to the end of the thing and everybody's leaving. And this woman who was in the crowd, she walks up, she's like, you asked the most realist question of the day. I was like, right? Like, how is that not that's gotta be.
I love what you're saying though, because there's this, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a creative type, I own
such a
50
show
companies.
off.
But you're right, there's a lot of too much pride in it.
Oh yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
there's a lot of downsides.
It's
to
like,
it.
yeah, you did it. Good for you. Now, like, how did you get there? And do you remember all that? And also, this is not this huge cash machine here. You know what I mean? Like, we have this place so that we can have a job here, not so that we can sit home and collect the money.
Yeah.
That will be great if that happens. That's
Sure.
obviously a great goal. But like, it really, like, the whole studio from the beginning has been so that we can have a job at a studio. You know, it's just like we needed to own it because there was no other studio for us to work at.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's sort of like a weird thing when you think of it, and it still is sort of like that. You know, we still get paid sort of that same way. It's not like we take dividends and we're not.
Right.
There isn't this profit sharing and there's no stocks or anything. You know, so but that's something to keep in mind as well. You know, it's just be humble, dummy.
I love it. Dave, what do you see happening? Or what do you hope for?
Oh, the longer term? I mean, I definitely hope that we can kind of, you know, I think that Steve and I have similar outlook in trying to like refine this place, you know. So we have goals for like outside beautification. You know, we want to go solar at some point. You know, it'd be cool to have this be like a really low impact environmentally, like for the studio, particularly because we're such a big user of electricity. But I think the other part of it that's cool is, you know, that outside of refining it, I mean, if we are able to kind of, you know, dependent upon how record making continues to go, if we're able to kind of still be a studio working, that's kind of a pretty big goal too, you know, because there's always the question that people are kind of raising about when is this kind of thing even not, you know, like we're niche. You know, like not everybody's out there recording drums and real instruments all the time.
Sure.
That's why one of the reasons I mentioned the splice thing that I thought was interesting, because it's like just another little spoke of like business that we can kind of get into to kind of continue. You know, so like I've said to Steve, I'm like, you know, for years I've been trying to get like the jazz heads in here. You keep trying to, you know, pull these strings in here to keep us going
And widen your net.
Yeah, you know, like because you know because not only like with myself, I mean, I have organic ties to these types of scenes, but Matt really enjoys it as well. So if we had engineers that were like, I don't want to do that stuff, then we'd be done.
Yeah.
But because we have people that are willing to engage with that, yeah, I mean, you know, and I hope that obviously the goal from the studio perspective is like we continue to do better and better records or get better and better clients in here, ideally, you know, and then like, you know, as far as like the financial end, it would be obviously nice that. Well, one of the things really that I figured I would piggyback on Steve was talking about, like not having a retirement, is that the architect that helped us with this place was saying that architects generally, because he's like, man, I gotta do, you know, he's like a decade older than us, but he's like, man, I gotta do what you guys did. You know, like I gotta get a building, because he's like, because all the old architects I talked to, remember that, Steve?
Yeah,
they all that is their retirement.
The real estate.
Yeah, you know, they had bought a place in Morristown back when Morristown wasn't as big of a deal, and now they're going to sell it for like $4 million when they're 65, you know? And Jay was just kind of like, man, I got to get into that kind of end of things. You know, and actually even our buddies that have an ad agency over in Philly, they were talking about the same thing about investing in like real estate.
Oh, it is strange.
know?
Well, I mean, and even for us, we didn't own until now, right? So it was strange for how long? How many years did we pay rent?
Yeah,
You know what I
we
mean?
paid rent
15
for like 12,
years.
You
12
could have
years.
bought this
Yeah.
building with all that rent.
Oh my God! I mean, yeah, the things you could do with the money. Right. So, but you know, and
It is what it is.
and I also don't even. I've never looked at rent that way. I mean, I think it sucks to pay rent, but if you're getting use of what you're doing, just
Exactly.
it's just an operating expense, you know. And I think that's an important thing that for people too, opening a business and doing a business. There are operating expenses, man. You're going to break stuff. You know, you're going to have to, you know, just the way it is. You're going to scratch the floor. You're going to get a flooded basement. We had a flooded basement 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
I always tell him, like, it's funny, man, because like this is my final Drexel class today, dude. I literally have this PowerPoint that I make jokingly look horrible. It's about business management, and I just go point to point and I give them numbers. And I just like, okay, this is insurance. This is specialty equipment insurance. This is this. This is what this costs.
This is your
you
French
know?
drain failing.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like,
this is
this is how you write it off. This is what depreciation means.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm like, please tell me in the 4 years you're at Drexel, like I'm repeating this, and they're like, nope,
Yeah.
they're not. You're not hearing it anywhere.
Yeah, and people
You know?
and people really don't talk about. I feel like it's not a thing. We try to work it into talking to students about how much you get paid to do stuff. Like I teach a live audio class. I tell them how much I get paid.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, I got paid. I got paid this much to do that gig the other
Yeah,
night.
we always hide that from everybody.
Yeah, why would
It's
you
like,
hide that?
Yeah.
Because if it's not enough, then people are going to be like, this ain't the job for
Yeah,
me.
see ya.
And if it's enough or if it's a lot, people are like, I want this job. You know, like if I had known, you know, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
Is what it is. That's why I try to tell people, because if I had known, I
Yeah.
would have done things differently. So I'm trying to change the
Right.
system, you know?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Wow, you guys are full of advice there.
No, shit.
My last question is.
Oh, wait, you already said that was the last question. What was
No,
the
no, no. I have
This is
one
last
last
business.
question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
One last question. If you were stuck on an island,
Oh, God.
you get one book, one album, and one meal. What is it? What are you bringing? What are you having?
one book,
One album, one meal.
I got the meal. I know that. It's easy.
Yeah.
Are we together on the island? Are we going to share this meal?
Nope. Sorry, man.
We could probably work it out, though, to be honest with you.
This is some deepness.
This is the hardest question.
Yeah, I mean.
All right, tiramisu.
Okay.
Chicken parm.
Oh wait, he's going all food.
Yeah,
no. I'm
doing no. It's my meal. I get three. You got appetizer, main course, dessert. Where have you guys never eaten a meal?
No. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were just complete. Okay.
I'm just naming foods. He just started naming foods. Mozzarella sticks, chicken parm over pasta, tiramisu, and then one book.
One book.
No. One album.
One album.
Pinkerton probably is the one.
Really?
Yeah.
I love that.
It has it all, top to bottom.
I never saw that coming. Okay, you're passing on the book.
I need to think on the book.
Okay, you think on the book, Dave?
Food, falafel's just so eatable.
Yeah.
You know, so eatable.
Every
day.
day. Every day.
Every day. I could seriously, man. It's got it all. Like the onion, like the.
All right.
Yeah. Like I don't even need to expand on that.
Yeah, good.
I mean, if you,
I wasn't gonna make it.
Yeah. If I just said falafel, you know, like
we got it.
I mean, it'd be great if I had some soda every once in a while, but hey, man, whatever. Album, that's really tough, man. I feel like for a long time I was a Radiohead fan for a long time, man. So OK Computer is a very listenable record to me. Still, you know, I was a big Hail to the Thief fan.
So many layers in their stuff too.
Yeah. So I always enjoyed that, and I always enjoyed the repeatability to it.
Man, he really liked your answer. He didn't like my answer.
Okay.
Yeah. He waved his hand at you. He was like, "Oh yeah, I love that."
I'm either going Radiohead or honestly, I'm going Pixies because you
got to pick an album, dude.
I know,
not a discography.
It would probably Doolittle. That's the one that I've heard the most. You know. All right, so then
the book.
Are you familiar with Tom Robbins? Skinny Legs and All.
Who's Tom Robbins?
All right, so
I know Tony Robbins.
There you go. Yeah, no, there you go. Skinny Legs and All. What's that? Yeah, it's a novel. Yeah. So Tom Robbins was like kind of like.
I keep thinking Tim Robbins every time you say it.
I know. It's and actually every time you say that, I get like, am I saying? Is it the
It's
right person?
Tom Robbins.
Mm-hmm. It's
you
like,
don't have to go into it deep. Just is it a novel?
It's a novel,
okay.
And it's generally they're just kind of like I don't know how to explain the stories. They're almost kind of like like hijinks, so to speak. But it's like kind of a fun book, I would say for sure.
But honestly, play on saying the Bible. What other book has that much content? Like that is honestly like
Infinite Jest.
Yeah.
Is that
easy.
What's that? What's Infinite Jest?
Oh, you're not familiar with Infinite Jest?
Okay. No, what is it?
It's like just it's kind of become a joke. Because it's like such like if you want to appear smart, you always have Infinite Jest.
I've read the Infinite
Just
Jest.
a really difficult book to get through.
Yeah, that's
very
not
long.
Yeah,
kind of like the Bible.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, like they would be smart to bring like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, something that's like has an epic sense to it that you could. There are sections to it that you could re-enjoy. Mm-hmm. But I don't have one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we'll take those. But back to the Pinkerton. I was just laughing because I was shocked.
Why? What? It's got to be some like.
Pinkerton's good.
I got to say like
amazing.
Yeah,
no, Pinkerton was.
Oh, I really think Nina Simone's 1965
I don't
album.
know. Yeah. No, I thought Pinkerton was their best.
Oh yeah.
It was
I
all
think
downhill.
I think sonically it's great. I think the songs are great.
The songs are so interesting.
What I was gonna say about that one, like, there's like I'm a big fan of the Breeders record Pod. That they're records that I got really. Did you hear that? I got really acclimated to like the flow of the album. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I know it so well.
I don't know. Is Pod have a hit? One Divine Hammer? No, that was
no. Pod has no hit.
Oh.
But she says the word "oh" like 790 times on it.
Oh.
There's even a song called "Oh." Yeah, check it out. It's an Albini record. Yeah, it's real good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's pre
Last Splash. The one before it. Yeah.
Awesome.
That was fun.
Well, thank you guys so much
definitely.
for giving me your time. And just real quick, I love just some of the things I really love for those that are listening on the business side is how much they talked about the value of networking and what that's done for the studio and the scene and just building an environment. You know, you can do that with your company. It doesn't have to just be a product or a service. And I love you talked about having great tools and getting the best tools and just this idea to always improve and be better at what you're doing. So anyway, Dave, Steve, thank you guys for hanging with me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was unexpected, but fun.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of The Company Next Door.